Hey, this is Ryan Crotin. I'm here from TopVelocity. Can't stress enough, we're so thankful for being here. I'm here with Jordan Oseguera from our company, who's the Director of Pitching Performance, and we've had some great conversations. Earlier on, I communicated the progression of injuries that go from fatigue, weakness, and compensation. Okay, compensation means that the athlete changes how they move in order to have a similar result. So in baseball, you may not see a change in velocity while the athlete's fatiguing because they might do different things. For example, if their arm drops, okay, because their shoulder strength, maybe their scaption strength is going down in games, they're going to start to tilt to be able to keep their arm in the same position so the release point is very similar and not sacrifice velocity. That's called a compensation, okay? A compensation is when we move differently to have a similar intended result, okay? Now, when velocity declines, that I think is protective, because remember I told you that 1 mile per hour equals 1 Newton meter of torque on the inner elbow, okay? If that velocity goes down, you lose 1 mile per hour, you're gonna lose torque, okay? So that's protective. When an athlete loses velocity, yeah, it's extreme fatigue, but they are protected. The issue is when we don't know the strength imbalances, potentially even range of motion issues, we might not see that compensation because they're maintaining velocity, and in some cases they may maintain command by moving differently, so we need to assess strength. But I want to get into the fatigue-induced injury model, okay? And I've been thinking about this for a while. Injuries are my thing. Can't stand people getting hurt in baseball. I think we can do better with science, and obviously with a very easy portable technology where everybody has one, we're going to have a lot of big data to be able to say, hey, when a strength in this athlete dips down to a certain level, we need to do X, Y, and Z. We need to understand, is the training related more to fatigue, so we have to regress the training, or do we need to amplify it because they're weak? So this is the fatigue-based injury model, okay? So there are 3 big areas that are involved in fatigue-based injuries, okay? So on the one hand, I call these psychophysiologic factors, okay? It's a big word for saying brain, behavior, and body, all right? I believe that athletes, even hitters, you've seen that now, that struggle, they end up doing much more work. They might hit more than they're usually hitting. We tend to want to overwork when we're not seeing success, and that puts a lot of wear and tear in the body. So some of these cognitive elements, when we say, hey, we're not performing well, and baseball's a tough game because everybody knows if you're not performing well, it is public. It's not like any other job, and obviously anybody in pro sport, they have public information how well they do at their job. So it can affect our brain chemistry. We can say to ourselves, hey, we're not doing well. I need to do more, okay? I need to do more work. I might not be throwing as hard. My velocity's going down. I gotta make X, Y, and Z changes. I gotta throw harder. You know, mentally, the athlete is in a good place. And what happens too under cognitive loads like stress, you have a behavioral change, okay? We know when we're stressed. I mean, you got a big exam, a big test, big job interview. It can affect our sleep. Sleep is so important for athletes, especially in this fatigue-based injury paradigm. We got to have our athletes have sleep. So, you know, cognitively, it's going to affect the way that the athlete has restful sleep. That's a behavioral change. Some athletes get super stressed that they don't eat the same amount, or they eat different foods. They have a gravitation towards sugar, and that's a big problem, okay? And then the body aspects, those are the physiologic aspects. There might be a change in their nervous system, their sympathetic nervous system might alter the amount of force they can produce. Their cardiovascular performance could go down. There's differences in our endocrine system, which is hormonal, that occur, you know, at this stage in these psychophysiologic issues where they have more melatonin in the day and they have more cortisol at night. So they have that stress hormone that keeps them awake at night. And then, you know, they have more of the melatonin. They're really sleepy in the morning. The body doesn't feel good. You know, some of them are dealing with depression. Athletes are people. They have the same issues that anybody else does in this world, and we have to be able to understand it, okay? So the next thing, which I think is easily remedied, okay, is confused motor preferences. So this is coaching decisions, and we're developing a course called the Certified Pitching Biomechanist. We're going to go in how to read data, how to evaluate movement from data, and creating a structured way to attack a process. I'm going to get into a little bit of this in one of the slides that we have. But this confused motor preferences, this happens when we want to get a pitcher to change out of something that they're accustomed to. You know, I'll give a few simple examples. Some pitchers might take the ball out of their glove with their thumb on top, okay, in a supinated position. That's pronated with my palm down, and this is supinated. I take it out of my glove with my thumb on top. Some guys do that to preset a breaking ball. It happens, but what happens is if we change something like that, it's not really in their hardwiring of their motor program, okay? So you're taking an athlete that's a supinator when they get the ball out of the glove, and you're getting them to be a pronator. Okay, and that puts extra stress potentially on the pronator mass, you know, and it changes the muscle contributions to stability. There's all sorts of things that happen there. Another element that you can see, and I see this a lot, is, and this is just a brief diagram of the foot. I have one where it's toe down, the other one flat foot, and the other one heel down, okay, in terms of lead foot strike, okay, stride foot contact. So you may take an athlete who wants to be a plantar flexor. That means they want to touch down with their toe first and collapse to their heel as part of their braking mechanism, and you may redesign them and have them do something completely opposite. They may have a heel strike, okay? So we have to appreciate those things, or you might have an athlete who's in between who may be able to make those motor preference connections, but something like that can really impact the athlete because they have a predetermined emphasis on the back side of their body or the front side of their body as far as coordinating movement. Okay, so that can change things. So when we look at these two elements, there are psychophysiologic factors that cause injury, and then you have your confusion of motor preferences, or really coaching errors, that maybe not using data in making those decisions, or really having a good conversation with athletes to see how comfortable they are, but it can alter recovery. Okay, so altered recovery means that the muscle tissue isn't going to regenerate. Our force properties are not going to be as good. Our nervous system, as I mentioned here, in the body, you know, that fight or flight response, that sympathetic, which is our adrenaline response, or our parasympathetic response, which is basically putting us under a state of relaxation. That gets altered, and our recoverability is affected. So that's a first element of fatigue that's a problem. But here's the big issue, because there's another connection between these two factors that is a mechanical determinant of injuries, and that's when we have altered strength, okay? So we have altered strength because of altered recovery, whether it's neurological, whether it's metabolic. Our muscles aren't getting enough nutrition to be able to contract, definitely hormonal, and just contractile. You got a fatigued muscle, we're altered. But what happens, as I mentioned in the compensation, their mechanics are going to change. And generally, when it changes about the arm, that's when we see injury, because what can happen is that the loading on the elbow changes, okay? The loading that we have to withstand with our pronator flexor muscles, and particularly our FDS, our pinch grip, because we're holding the ball at maximum external rotation, it's affected. You know, it might be something simple when they're at maximal external rotation that their arm just opens a little bit, you know, and that changes the relative loading of what's going on at the inner elbow that puts stress that's altered on the muscles and ligaments, and over time, what happens is there becomes more micro damage. And the thing is remember, we have altered recovery, right? So now we have this micro damage, and it's not regenerating. So we have these little cuts and fibers that are not getting repaired in our tendons and our ligaments, and it's setting us up for injury. And so a lot of the coursework in the Certified ArmCare Specialist course, we go through some of these elements. What's the competitive process? How do we reduce this particular element of psychophysiologic injury determinants? In our Certified Pitching Biomechanics course, we're going to have this ready in 2023 on how to not confuse motor preferences and making good decisions with data, having a process, okay? And then we are looking at also, you know, these mechanics. How do we look at compensations? How do we avoid micro damage? And a lot of it, I circled it, is being able to have a high level of maximum strength. I think of all of this thing that I have on the board, all these elements in the flow chart, the one thing that you need to remember is strength matters most. And another thing that was said to me early in my career by a great strength coach, his name's Tim Pilote, he's with the USA Olympic volleyball program and water polo, but he said, hey, maximum strength athletes are harder to kill. When we have higher levels of strength in our throwing arm, and we've seen this in our data, they don't fatigue as much. There's less strength loss that we're seeing out of our app and in the analytics. So keep bumping up that maximum strength and avoid fatigue-based injuries. Thanks.